History loves conquerors who take. Alexander seized Persia. Caesar claimed Gaul. Genghis Khan devoured half the world. But what about the king who conquered through giving? What happens when someone becomes so wealthy that their generosity destroys economies? This is the story of Mansa Musa, the African emperor who possessed more wealth than anyone in human history, yet nearly bankrupted himself and crashed an entire region's economy simply by being too generous. A man who ruled an empire most of the world didn't even know existed, controlling more gold than all the European kingdoms combined. When he decided to go on a religious pilgrimage in 1324, he brought so much gold with him that he accidentally triggered an economic recession that lasted 12 years. Wait, what? Yes, a recession, caused by giving away too much money. And this is just the beginning of how one man's journey would permanently alter the trajectory of global trade, Islamic scholarship, and Africa's place in world history. At stake was nothing less than the economic stability of North Africa and the Middle East, the cultural identity of West Africa, and the future of Islamic learning in sub-Saharan Africa. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage would transform him from a regional monarch into a global icon, a man whose legend would inspire maps for centuries and whose wealth would become the measurement by which all other fortunes were judged. How does a king of Aouk's landlocked West African empire become the most famous African ruler in world history? How does one journey, one act of devotion, reshape international trade routes and put an entire civilization on the global map? Picture the world in 1312. Europe languishes in the shadow of the Crusades, still recovering from religious warfare and political fragmentation. The Mongol Empire dominates Asia. The Islamic world stretches from Spain to Indonesia, a vast network of trade, scholarship, and cultural exchange. And in West Africa, hidden from European eyes by the vastness of the Sahara Desert, lies the Mali Empire, a civilization built on two things that would define human history: salt and gold. This isn't the Africa of European colonial narratives. This is sophisticated, urban, wealthy Africa. The Mali Empire in the early 14th century controls the goldfields of Bambouk and Buro, territories that produce nearly half of the world's gold supply. The capital, Niani, bustles with merchants from across the Islamic world. Mosques rise alongside traditional shrines. Arabic scholars debate theology in the same squares where griots, traditional storytellers, preserve centuries of oral history. The trans-Saharan trade routes pump wealth through this empire like arteries. Gold flows north. Salt, copper, and manufactured goods flow south. The Sahara, rather than being a barrier, becomes a highway of commerce. Massive caravans, sometimes thousands of camels strong, traverse the desert for months, connecting sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean world. But Europe has no idea this empire exists. To medieval Europeans, Africa south of the Sahara is terra incognita, unknown land filled with fantastical creatures from legend. They have no concept that just across that desert barrier, an economic powerhouse controls the commodity that backs their entire monetary system: gold. Into this world of wealth and power steps Mansa Musa. When he ascends to the throne in 1312, he inherits not just an empire, but a responsibility, a religious obligation that every Muslim who can afford it must fulfill at least once in their lifetime: the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. For most Muslims, this journey represents years of saving, a dangerous trek across continents, the adventure of a lifetime. For Mansa Musa, it becomes something else entirely, an opportunity to announce to the Islamic world, and, by extension, to all of human civilization, that the Mali Empire exists, that it's wealthy beyond measure, and that its king rivals any monarch on earth. What happens when you combine unlimited wealth, profound religious devotion, and the political savvy to understand that perception shapes reality? You're about to find out. Because in 1324, Mansa Musa sets out from Niani with a caravan so large, so opulent, so staggeringly wealthy, that it would literally rewrite the economic rules of the medieval world. The man who would become the richest person in human history came to power through tragedy and mystery. Mansa Musa wasn't supposed to be emperor. According to oral traditions preserved by Malian griots, he served as deputy to his predecessor, Mansa Abu Bakr II, a king obsessed with a question that would seal his fate. What lies beyond the Western Ocean? Abu Bakr II believed the Atlantic could be crossed. While Europe cowered at the thought of sailing beyond sight of land, this West African emperor commissioned a fleet. He sent 200 ships westward, seeking whatever lay beyond the horizon. Only one ship returned, its captain babbling about a powerful current that swallowed the fleet. Did Abu Bakr II Atetu accept this disaster? Did he mourn his lost ships and sailors? No. He commissioned an even larger fleet, 2,000 vessels, abdicated his throne to Musa, and sailed away. He was never seen again. Imagine inheriting an empire because your predecessor decided to sail into legend. Musa takes power in 1312, around age 40, thrust into leadership of a domain spanning approximately 500,000 square miles. That's larger than all of Western Europe combined. His domain stretches from the Atlantic coast to the gold-producing regions near modern-day Ghana, from the Sahara's southern edge to the forests of the south. But Musa doesn't just inherit territory. He inherits a sophisticated governmental system. The Mali Empire operates through a feudal structure where provincial governors, called farbas, control regions and owe tribute to the Mansa emperor. The empire's power rests on three pillars: military strength, commercial dominance, and strategic location along trade routes. The first test comes quickly. In medieval West Africa, succession often sparks conflict. Rival claimants emerge. Provincial governors wonder if this new Mansa commands the same respect as his predecessors. The empire's enemies, desert Berber tribes, competing kingdoms, watch for signs of weakness. Musa responds with calculated shows of force and diplomatic brilliance. He expands the empire's military, organizing cavalry units and infantry divisions that can move rapidly across the savannah. He reinforces the empire's control over Timbuktu and Gao, two cities that serve as gateways to the Sahara. He confirms the loyalty of provincial governors through a combination of generous rewards and subtle threats. But military power alone doesn't build an empire. Economics does. And Musa understands that the Mali Empire's wealth flows from its control of two critical resources: gold, which finances everything, and salt, which sustains life itself. Here's what most people don't understand about medieval West Africa. Salt is worth its weight in gold. Literally. In a hot climate, without refrigeration, salt preserves food. The human body needs it to function. But the gold-producing regions have no salt deposits. Meanwhile, the Sahara contains massive salt mines at Tagaza, where workers carve blocks from the desert itself. The economic genius of the Mali Empire lies in controlling both ends of this exchange. The empire dominates the gold fields of the south and controls access to the salt mines of the north. It taxes the caravans that move between them. Every transaction, every trade, every exchange, the empire takes a percentage. Within 2 years of taking power, Musa has consolidated control. He's proven he can govern, can command, can maintain the complex web of relationships that holds his empire together. His capital at Niani thrives as a cosmopolitan center where African traditionalists, Muslim scholars, and international merchants coexist. The empire's reputation grows among Arab traders who bring tales of this wealthy kingdom back to North Africa and the Middle East. But Musa wants more than regional recognition. He's a devout Muslim ruling an empire where Islam mingles with traditional African religions. He spent his youth studying Islamic law, theology, and Arabic literature, and he's acutely aware that his empire, despite its wealth and sophistication, remains unknown to the wider Islamic world. The Hajj calls to him, not just as religious obligation, but as opportunity. What if a king didn't just go to Mecca, but went in a way that announced his power to every Muslim kingdom along the route? What if he transformed a spiritual journey into a diplomatic tour, an economic statement, a performance of wealth so extravagant that the world would never forget it? In 1324, after 12 years of preparation, Mansa Musa makes his decision. He will go to Mecca, and he will bring the Mali Empire with him. The caravan that assembles in Niani in 1324 defies comprehension. According to multiple contemporary Arab sources, Mansa Musa travels with 60,000 men. Let that number sink in. 60,000 people crossing the Sahara Desert. For context, that's roughly the population of medieval Paris, the largest city in Europe at the time. But the numbers only begin to tell the story. The caravan includes 12,000 personal servants, all wearing Persian silk and carrying golden staffs. 500 servants precede the emperor, each carrying a golden staff weighing approximately 4 pounds. The emperor himself rides either on horseback or in a throne carried by servants, shaded by silken parasols topped with golden birds. Then there's the gold. So much gold that our sources struggle to convey it adequately. Mansa Musa brings 80 to 100 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold dust. Quick math! That's somewhere between 24,000 and 30,000 pounds of gold. In today's currency, approximately $400 to $500 million. But remember, this is just spending money for the journey. This doesn't represent the Mali Empire's total wealth, just what the emperor considers appropriate pocket change for a religious pilgrimage. The caravan also includes scholars, officials, soldiers, merchants, griots, and Musa's senior wife with her own entourage of 500 servants. Provisions for 60,000 people crossing the Sahara require logistical planning that rivals a military campaign. Water, food, shelter, medicine. The caravan stretches for miles, an entire mobile city moving across the sand. Picture yourself standing at an oasis as this procession appears on the horizon. First, distant glints of gold catching sunlight. Then gradually the scale reveals itself. Hours pass as the caravan continues arriving. Soldiers, servants, scholars, camels, horses, the golden staffs, the silk pavilions, the emperor himself, radiating wealth and power. You've lived your entire life in North Africa, seen caravans from across the Islamic world. But nothing has prepared you for this. The journey follows established trans-Saharan routes, but Musa transforms it into a diplomatic roadshow. The caravan stops at Walata, a Malian city on the desert's edge, then Tuat, then crosses into Egypt, arriving in Cairo in July 1324. At each stop, Musa performs calculated acts of generosity and displays of wealth. He distributes gold, not carefully, not strategically, lavishly, extravagantly, carelessly. In Walata, he gives gold to local officials and scholars. In the Saharan oases, he pays merchants far above market rates. When he reaches Cairo, the intellectual and economic capital of the Mamluk Sultanate and one of the world's great cities, his generosity reaches legendary proportions. Contemporary historian Al-Umari, writing just 12 years after the visit, records what happened. This man spread upon Cairo the flood of his generosity. There was no person, officer of the court, or holder of any office of the Sultanate who did not receive a sum of gold from him. The people of Cairo earned incalculable sums from him, whether by buying and selling or by gifts. Musa meets with the Mamluk Sultan Al-Nasir Muhammad. The meeting nearly becomes a diplomatic incident because Musa initially refuses to kiss the ground before the Sultan, a standard protocol. Musa argues he prostrates only before God. Eventually, they compromise. Musa bows to the Sultan as a fellow Muslim ruler, rather than performing complete submission. But while protocol creates tension, gold dissolves it. Musa distributes gifts with such abandon that he wins over the Mamluk court. He visits scholars and theologians, engaging in discussions about Islamic law. He tours architectural wonders. He prays at important mosques. And everywhere he goes, he gives gold. The effects ripple through Cairo's economy immediately. With suddenly abundant gold flooding the market, its value plummets. Gold that had maintained stable value for generations loses approximately 25% of its worth practically overnight. Merchants panic. Money changers scramble. The economic impact of one man's generosity crashes the regional gold market. But Musa doesn't notice or doesn't care. He's focused on his destination. After months in Cairo, the caravan continues to Mecca, arriving during the Hajj season of 1324. Here, surrounded by Muslims from across the world, Musa performs the religious rituals, circling the Kaaba, standing at Arafat, stoning the pillars representing Satan. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of thousands of pilgrims from across the Islamic world, from Spain to Indonesia, from Russia to East Africa, all gathered in one place. And among them, this African emperor whose wealth makes even the richest Arab merchants look like paupers. His golden staffs, his silk pavilions, his servants wearing clothes that most pilgrims couldn't afford in a lifetime. Musa uses the Hajj as a networking opportunity. He meets scholars, rulers, merchants. He invites prominent individuals back to Mali, offering generous salaries to anyone willing to help develop his empire's educational and religious infrastructure. Among those he recruits is Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, a renowned Granada-born architect and poet. Al-Sahili will return with Musa to Mali and revolutionize West African architecture. The return journey follows a different route, passing through the holy cities of Medina and Jerusalem before returning to Cairo. By now, Musa has been traveling for over a year, and he's beginning to realize the economic impact of his generosity. His massive gold giveaways have destabilized regional currencies. More practically, he's running low on gold himself. The richest man in human history finds himself in an awkward position. He needs to borrow money. In Cairo, Musa takes loans from Egyptian merchants at extremely high interest rates, reportedly owing tens of thousands of dinars. He needs these funds to finance the remainder of his journey home. This moment reveals something crucial about Musa's character. Lesser rulers might hide such financial embarrassment. Musa addresses it directly, acknowledging the loans and planning to repay them from Mali's gold supplies. His honesty, combined with his obvious wealth, reassures the lenders. They understand this isn't a broke king. It's an emperor who simply miscalculated his spending. The return journey takes months. When Musa finally arrives back in Niani in 1325, he's been gone for nearly 2 years. But he returns transformed. And he brings transformation with him. Al-Sahili, the Granadan architect, begins designing buildings in a new style. The Jinguaraber Mosque in Timbuktu, completed in 1327, becomes an architectural landmark, a fusion of North African and West African design elements. Its distinctive mud brick construction with wooden beams protruding from the walls becomes a signature of Sahelian architecture. Musa establishes madrasas, Islamic schools, in Timbuktu, Gao, and Niani. He brings back scholars and books, creating libraries and centers of learning. Timbuktu, already a significant trading city, begins its transformation into one of the Islamic world's great intellectual centers. By the 15th century, it will house hundreds of thousands of manuscripts covering everything from astronomy to medicine, from Islamic law to mathematics. the empire's international reputation soars. Arab merchants who previously knew Mali only through intermediaries now speak of it as a land of legendary wealth. Stories of Musa's pilgrimage spread through the Islamic world. Scholars begin writing about Mali in geographic and historical texts. The empire moves from obscurity to celebrity. Perhaps most significantly, Musa's pilgrimage establishes direct diplomatic and commercial relationships between Mali and the major Islamic states. Trade increases. Cultural exchange accelerates. Mali becomes integrated into the wider Islamic world in ways that previous rulers had never achieved. Musa's power at this point is absolute. He controls an empire enriched by gold and salt, expanded through strategic conquest, and now renowned throughout the Islamic world. He's established himself not just as a powerful king, but as a legitimate Islamic monarch on par with the rulers of Egypt, Morocco, or any other major Muslim state. But every exercise of power carries a price, and Musa's dramatic display of wealth, while establishing his empire's reputation, has unleashed consequences he never anticipated. The gold market collapse that Musa triggered in 1324 doesn't recover quickly. Contemporary sources document that gold remained devalued in Egypt, Arabia, and across North Africa for more than a decade. Merchants who had built businesses around stable gold values watched their enterprises struggle. Money changers lost fortunes. The inflation caused by suddenly abundant gold hurt ordinary people buying basic goods. Musa had crashed an economy through generosity, an almost unique historical achievement. Most economic crises stem from hoarding, warfare, or natural disaster. Musa created one through excessive giving. The irony haunts his legacy. He wanted to demonstrate piety and power. Instead, he proved that even good intentions, backed by unlimited resources, can cause harm when not tempered by understanding of systemic consequences. But the economic impact pales compared to the geopolitical consequences of announcing his empire's wealth. Musa's pilgrimage had achieved its goal. The world now knew about Mali's gold. But that knowledge attracted attention, not all of it friendly. Desert Berber tribes intensified their raids, seeking to capture some of Mali's wealth. Rival kingdoms along the empire's borders began probing for weaknesses. Most significantly, Mali's ostentatious display planted seeds in European imagination that would eventually contribute to colonial interest in Africa. European cartographers began adding Mali to their maps. The Catalan Atlas of 1375, created in Spain, depicts Mansa Musa sitting on a throne in West Africa, holding a golden orb and scepter. The caption reads, "This Negro lord is called Musa Mali, lord of the Negroes of Guinea. So abundant is the gold which is found in his country that he is the richest and most noble king in all the land." For the first time, Europeans conceived of sub-Saharan Africa as a place of wealth rather than just mystery. This shift in perception would have profound implications centuries later, when European powers would use Africa's perceived wealth as justification for colonial exploitation. Musa himself faced internal challenges. Traditional religious leaders within Mali questioned the empire's increasing Islamization. While Musa supported religious tolerance, his architectural projects, his invitation of foreign scholars, and his embrace of Islamic law sometimes conflicted with traditional practices. Balancing these tensions required constant diplomatic skill. There's also evidence of succession anxiety. Musa had multiple sons, and like many monarchs, he worried about maintaining stability after his death. He appointed his son Magan as heir, but the very display of wealth that had brought Mali international fame also made the throne more attractive to potential usurpers. The empire's administrative challenges grew with its reputation. More international trade meant more complex taxation issues, more disputes to adjudicate, more cultural conflicts to manage. Musa expanded the empire's bureaucracy, but rapid growth created inefficiencies. In 1330, Musa made another significant move. He conquered Songhai, a rival kingdom centered on Gao. This expansion extended Mali's territory eastward along the Niger River, but it also overextended the empire's administrative capacity. Governing such a vast, diverse territory required constant attention. Provincial governors wielded enormous local power, and keeping them loyal required a combination of rewards, oversight, and force. Musa's final years focused on consolidation. He strengthened Timbuktu's position as a commercial and intellectual center. He continued building projects initiated after his return from Hajj. He maintained diplomatic correspondence with other Islamic rulers. But the energy and ambition that had driven his dramatic pilgrimage seemed tempered by the complexities of actually governing the empire he had promoted so effectively. The tragic irony of Musa's achievement emerges in retrospect. He wanted to elevate his empire's status, to integrate it into the wider Islamic world, to demonstrate that African kingdoms could match or exceed any other civilization's sophistication. He succeeded spectacularly at all these goals, but in doing so, he also marked his empire as a target for raiders, for rivals, and eventually, centuries later, for colonial powers drawn by legends of African gold. Mansa Musa dies in 1337, having ruled for 25 years. His son Magan inherits the throne, but within 4 years, Magan is dead, possibly assassinated. Succession struggles plagued the empire for decades. The very wealth and prestige Musa had built becomes a source of conflict as various factions compete for control. Yet Musa's legacy transcends the political instability that follows his death. The intellectual infrastructure he established endures. Timbuktu continues its rise as a center of Islamic learning, reaching its peak in the 15th and 16th centuries. Scholars come from across the Islamic world to study at its madrasas. Its libraries house hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, many of which survive to this day, offering insights into medieval African scholarship. The architectural innovations al-Sahili introduced become standard across the Sahel region. The distinctive mud brick mosques with protruding beams, maintained by communities that regularly replaster them, still define West African Islamic architecture. Gingereber Mosque in Timbuktu remains functional, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and living connection to Musa's era. Musa's economic impact proves more complex to evaluate. Yes, he crashed regional gold markets, but the eventual recovery left those markets more closely integrated than before. The diplomatic and trade relationships he established connected Mali more firmly to trans-Saharan and Mediterranean commercial networks. After the initial chaos, this integration benefited the empire economically. His pilgrimage established a model that later West African rulers tried to emulate. Subsequent Malian rulers sponsored scholarship and architectural projects, maintaining the traditions Musa initiated. Even as Mali's political power eventually declined, its cultural and intellectual legacy continued. The most significant question about Musa's legacy involves how we measure historical impact. By some metrics, his pilgrimage was wasteful. He depleted state resources on an ostentatious display that caused economic harm. By others, it was brilliant strategic communication that elevated his empire's international status and left lasting cultural institutions. Modern economists estimate Musa's wealth at approximately $400 billion, more than the richest contemporary billionaires. But this comparison misses the point. Musa's wealth derived from controlling resources that his empire produced, not from capital accumulation in modern sense. His power rested on complex social, political, and economic systems, not just personal fortune. What would Musa think of his legacy? He was a devout Muslim who wanted to fulfill his religious obligations and elevate his empire's standing in the Islamic world. He succeeded at both, though perhaps not in ways he anticipated. His pilgrimage did announce Mali's power. But it also marked the beginning of a slow shift in how the outside world viewed Africa, from mysterious unknown to wealthy target. The Mali Empire continued after Musa's death, maintaining power until the 15th century, when the Songhai Empire gradually absorbed it. But the memory of Mansa Musa's wealth and his legendary pilgrimage outlasted the empire itself. For centuries, Arab geographers described West Africa in terms of Musa's journey. European cartographers depicted him on maps well into the 16th century. His story became embedded in the historical record in ways that few African rulers achieved. In our contemporary moment, Mansa Musa's story resonates for several reasons. It challenges Eurocentric narratives of African history that portray the continent as technologically backward or economically primitive before European contact. Mali was sophisticated, wealthy, and internationally connected. Facts that complicate simplistic historical narratives. His story also reminds us that wealth and power don't follow simple formulas. Musa had unlimited gold, but still crashed an economy. He wanted to demonstrate piety, but created a spectacle that made his empire a target. He built educational infrastructure that outlasted his political achievements. The relationship between intention and consequence proves complex. Perhaps most importantly, Musa's pilgrimage demonstrated that visibility carries both benefits and costs. By making Mali known to the wider world, he elevated its status, but he also marked it for future exploitation. This tension between seeking recognition and maintaining security remains relevant in international relations today. What would you have done in Musa's position? Given unlimited wealth, profound religious conviction, and political power, how would you have balanced the desire to announce your achievements with the need to protect your empire? Would you have shown restraint, or would you have seized the opportunity to make an unforgettable statement? The questions Musa's story raises don't have simple answers. But perhaps that's the point. History's most fascinating figures aren't those whose actions were obviously right or wrong, but those whose choices reveal the complexity of human ambition, the unpredictability of consequences, and the ways that individual decisions can ripple through centuries. Mansa Musa rewired global trade not through conquest or forced tribute, but through a display of wealth so overwhelming that it permanently altered how the world viewed West Africa. His gold traveled through economies and cultures. His architectural projects still stand. His intellectual institutions preserved knowledge for centuries. He proved that an African empire could compete with any power on earth, even while demonstrating that power, untempered by understanding of systemic effects, can cause unintended harm. The golden dust he scattered across North Africa has long since been spent. But the story it bought, of an empire so wealthy its king could casually crash economies, so sophisticated it produced scholars and architects, so ambitious it forced the world to acknowledge its existence, that story endures, challenging our assumptions and expanding our understanding of what Africa was and could be. If you found this journey through medieval African power and wealth fascinating, let us know in the comments. What aspect of Mansa Musa's story surprised you most? And what other forgotten historical narratives should we explore? Subscribe to discover more stories of civilizations that rewrote the rules of their eras, because history's most compelling lessons come from the figures who made the world acknowledge them on their own terms.